The plea in the rain poured down hard over the alien city, turning the cracked streets into small rivers. Neon lights flickered weakly, their colors bleeding into the puddles. The night was cold, a kind of cold that cut through clothes and skin. Cale walked with his head low, his heavy boots splashing in the water. He had just returned from a long mission, tired, bruised, and carrying nothing but the weight of his own thoughts. He was halfway down an empty street when he saw her. A small figure stood in the rain, blocking his path. She couldn't have been older than 10 by human years, though her alien features pointed ears. Faint blue markings under her eyes marked her as not from Earth. She was shivering so hard her shoulders shook, her thin clothes plastered to her skin. When she looked up at him, Cale saw fear in her eyes. But it wasn't the kind of fear that made you run away. It was the kind that made you beg. "Mighty human," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, save my sister." Cale stopped in his tracks. He had been called many things during his years as a soldier, but mighty human wasn't one of them. "Not lately. You've got the wrong person," he muttered, trying to step around her. "I'm not here for heroics." But she moved in front of him again, blocking his way. This time her voice broke. "They took her," she said, her breath shaky. "And if we don't go now, I'll never see her again." Cale frowned. "Who took her?" "The Iron Fangs," she said, almost whispering the name. Even saying it seemed to make her smaller, like the words themselves carried weight. "They came to our home at night. My sister fought them, so I could run." Cale's stomach tightened. The Iron Fangs weren't just street thugs. They were raiders, organized, armed, and ruthless. They didn't take prisoners for ransom. They took people for the deep mines, and nobody ever came back from there. The girl stepped closer, her eyes glistening with rain and tears. "You're strong. I saw you in the market last week. You stopped 3 men with your bare hands. If you help me, I know we can save her." Cale looked away. He didn't want to get involved. Not after what happened the last time he tried to save someone. The faces of old friends haunted him, faces he couldn't protect. He had promised himself he was done with rescue missions. But the rain kept falling, and she kept standing there, shivering, refusing to give up. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Lyra." "And your sister?" "Sana." Her voice wavered, but she stood straighter when she said it. Cale sighed. "Where did they take her?" Lyra pointed toward the far edge of the city, where dim red lights glowed against the horizon. "That way. To the loading yards. They'll put her on a transport at dawn." Cale knew those yards, dark, dangerous, crawling with guards and mercenaries. He'd barely survived them last time he was there. But if she was right, they had only a few hours before Sana was gone forever. He glanced at Lyra again. She was soaked, her lips almost blue from the cold, but her eyes held something he recognized. Not fear, not weakness, determination. Cale adjusted the strap of his worn jacket. "Fine, I'll help you. But you do exactly what I say. Understood?" Lyra nodded so fast he almost smiled. "Then show me where they went." They started moving through the narrow streets, Lyra leading the way. The city at night was a maze of shadows, with strange shapes moving behind broken windows. Cale's boots were silent now, his mind shifting into the old soldier's rhythm. Every sound, every flicker of light was a warning dot as they passed a burned-out building. Cale noticed black scorch marks on the ground. He crouched and touched. The edges, they were still warm. "Hovercraft engines," he muttered. "They're not far." Lyra glanced around nervously. "We have to hurry." But then, in the distance, came a sound that made Cale's pulse spike low, rumbling engines. Not just one. Several, and over the rain, voices began to echo, rough voices. calling out a name. Lyra. Her eyes went wide. They're looking for me. Kale's hand went to the sidearm on his belt. Stay close, and whatever happens, don't run unless I tell you. The voices grew louder, the engines closer. The street ahead split into one path toward the loading yards, the other deeper into the industrial district. Kale made his choice. Move, he said, guiding her toward the shadows. Behind them, the first of the Raider hovercrafts appeared, its searchlights cutting through the rain. The first trail the hovercraft's searchlight swept across the street, turning every puddle into a mirror of white light. Kale pulled Lyra into the shadow of a half-collapsed wall. The smell of wet metal and burning fuel filled the air. Stay down, he whispered. The beam passed over them once, then twice, before moving on. The hum of the engines grew fainter, but Kale knew the raiders wouldn't leave yet. They'd keep circling like hunters until they found their prey. Lyra's breathing was quick and shaky. Kale noticed her clutching a thin leather strap around her neck. A small metal charm dangled from it, engraved with 2 tiny stars. My sister made it for me, she said softly, catching him looking. She told me to never take it off. Even if... Her voice broke, but she forced herself to keep going. Even if she wasn't there anymore. Kale studied her for a second. The girl had more courage than most grown soldiers he'd met. Let's move, he said, and they slipped deeper into the side streets. The further they went, the more signs. Kale saw fresh boot prints in the mud, scraps of cloth snagged on twisted metal, the faint smell of burned oil. The trail was clear enough for him to follow, even through the rain. They passed through an old marketplace, now silent and abandoned. Stalls stood empty, their awnings torn and flapping in the wind. Kale glanced at one of the metal tables and froze. Black scorch marks, not just from hovercraft engines. These were from blaster fire. The marks were still warm. They're close, Kale muttered. Lyra's grip on his sleeve tightened. We can still catch them before they reach the yards. Kale nodded, but his mind was racing. The iron fangs were fast, but they were also cocky. If they thought no one was following, they wouldn't be moving at full speed. That gave him a chance. They slipped into an alley where the buildings leaned so close together that only a thin line of rain fell from above. At the far end, Kale saw movement, 2 silhouettes against the dim glow of a street lamp. Stay here, he told Lyra, pressing her against the wall. No matter what happens, you don't move until I come back. She nodded reluctantly, her wide eyes following him as he crept forward. The 2 figures ahead were talking in low voices. Kale got close enough to hear them. Shadow Baron wants her alive, one of them said. The sister's just a bonus. Kale's jaw tightened. Shadow Baron. He knew the name. Everyone in the underworld did. The second raider laughed. That? Little one's not going to last long. Baron doesn't like keeping kids around. Kale didn't wait to hear more. In one swift motion, he grabbed the nearest raider from behind, pulling him into the shadows and slamming him against the wall. The man barely had time to shout before Kale's elbow struck his temple, knocking him out cold. The second raider spun around, hand going for his weapon, but Kale was faster. He slammed into him, twisting his arm until the blaster clattered to the ground. You've got 10 seconds, Kale growled. Where's the girl's sister? The raider spat on the ground. You're too late. She's being moved to Dock 7. Transport leaves at dawn. Kale's grip tightened. How many guards? Enough to kill you twice, the raider sneered. Kale didn't smile. Then I'll just have to be faster than both deaths. He knocked the raider out cold and dragged both bodies into the shadows. When he returned to Lyra, she was staring at him, half in shock, half in awe. Fought them like it was nothing, she whispered. It's never nothing, Kale said. Now come on, we've got a dock to reach. They moved again, this time faster. The streets opened into the edge of the industrial district, where rusted towers and long-dead machines loomed like silent giants. Somewhere ahead, the low hum of engines and the clang of metal echoed through the fog. Cale slowed and raised a hand. "We're close, too close." Lyra pointed to a line of dim orange lights in the distance. "That's Dock 7. Cale scanned the area and frowned. "It's also a perfect place for an ambush." Before he could say more, the sound of boots on metal rang out from behind them. They weren't alone. Asterisk. The sound of boots on metal grew louder, echoing off the rusted walls around them. Cale's eyes narrowed. He counted the rhythm steady, confident. Whoever was behind them wasn't hiding. "They want us to know they're here." "Cale?" whispered. Lyra's voice shook. "What do we do?" Cale glanced ahead. Dock 7's glow was closer now, but the open ground leading to it was suicide. Too much space. No cover. He scanned the shadows to the right and saw a narrow service passage between two storage towers. "This way," he said, pulling her along. They slipped into the passage, the metal walls close enough to scrape Cale's shoulders. The air smelled of rust and stale oil. Somewhere above, a pipe dripped water in a slow, steady rhythm. They had almost reached the end when a figure stepped into the light ahead. A raider helmeted, armored, blaster already raised. Cale's hand went for his sidearm, but before he could draw, more footsteps came from behind. 2 more raiders blocked the way out. 3 armed men. One narrow space. Cale didn't hesitate. He shoved Lyra into the shadows behind a thick support beam and stepped into the center of the passage, making himself the only target. The lead raider laughed. "The Baron said you might show up, human. He told us to bring you in alive if possible." Cale smirked. "Tell the Baron I don't travel well in cages." The first shot came too fast for a normal soldier, but Cale wasn't normal. He moved low, letting the blaster bolt scorch the wall above his head. He grabbed a loose length of steel pipe from the ground and hurled it into the helmeted raider's chest. The impact staggered him back into the others. Cale closed the distance. Before they could recover, his fist smashing into the side of the nearest raider's helmet. A man fell, his blaster sliding across the floor. One of the others aimed for Lyra's hiding spot. Cale didn't even think. He kicked the fallen blaster into his own hand and fired, the shot slamming into the wall just beside the raider's head. The man dropped his weapon immediately, hands raised. The last raider tried to run, but Cale caught him by the back of his armor and slammed him into the wall hard enough to make the metal ring. "You've got 3 seconds," Cale growled. "Where's the girl's sister?" The man's voice cracked. "Dock 7. Transport bay, top level." Cale leaned in closer. "Who's guarding her?" The raider hesitated, then blurted it out. "The Baron's personal guards." Cale's stomach sank. The Baron's personal guards weren't just muscle. They were killers trained to take down whole squads. "Why does the Baron want her?" Cale asked. The man swallowed. "Because she knows his real name. She saw his face." Cale's eyes darkened. That meant the sister wasn't just a prisoner. She was a threat the Baron couldn't afford to let live. He knocked the raider out cold and grabbed one of their comm devices. "Might be useful," he muttered. When Cale turned back, Lyra was already stepping out of her hiding spot. Her hands were shaking, but her chin was lifted high. "You're not going to leave her, are you?" she asked quietly. Cale met her gaze. Not a chance. They left the narrow passage and climbed a set of old maintenance ladders moving above street level. From here, Cale could see Dock 7 in full bright floodlights, armed guards patrolling the perimeter, and the transport ship looming like a dark beast. And there, on the top level, chained near the loading ramp, was a young woman with the Same pointed ears and blue markings as Lyra, even from this distance. Kale could see she was exhausted, but still defiant. Lyra gripped the railing, her voice a whisper. "Sana." Kale's jaw tightened. "We've got one shot at this." Before he could say more, the cum device in his hand crackled to life. Deep, cold voice spoke. "I see you, human, and if you take one more step toward my ship, I'll throw the girl into the engines myself." Asterisk the Baron's name. The voice from the cum device was like ice, slow, measured, confident. Kale didn't answer right away. He scanned the dock again, his soldier's mind calculating distances, guard positions, and possible escape routes. The Shadow Baron wasn't bluffing, men like him never did. Beside him, Lyra's hands tightened on the railing. He sounds like a monster. Kale's jaw flexed. Monsters are easy. This one's worse. He's careful. The cum crackled. Again. "Walk away, human. The girl's fate is sealed. But perhaps I'll let you keep the little one with you. For now." Kale glanced at Lyra. Her eyes were locked on her sister, who was still chained near the ramp, a guard gripping each arm. She looked weak, but Kale noticed her eyes sharp, watching everything. "She's waiting for a chance," Kale muttered. Lyra swallowed. "Then give her one." Kale smirked despite the danger. "I intend to." He crouched low, pointing toward a row of massive cargo crates stacked near the perimeter fence. "We move along that line. It'll get us close enough to the ship without being seen. But once we're in, there's no turning back." "I'm not turning back," Lyra said firmly. They climbed down from the maintenance level and slipped into the shadows of the dock's outer wall. Rain dripped steadily from overhead pipes, masking the sound of their footsteps. As they moved between the crates, Kale's mind kept turning over the raider's words. "She knows his real name." In the underworld, a true name was more than just words. It was leverage, power, and vulnerability. If Sana had seen the Baron's face and knew the name behind it, she could destroy him. That meant he wouldn't stop hunting her, even if she escaped. Halfway to the ship, Kale stopped suddenly. Two of the Baron's guards were standing at the corner ahead, their black armor gleaming under the floodlights. Kale whispered, "Stay here." He stepped out casually, as if he belonged there. The guards stiffened, one reaching for his weapon. Kale didn't give them the chance. He moved fast, grabbing the first by the neck, slamming him into the crate wall, and kicking the second in the knee so hard the man dropped. Both were unconscious before they could make a sound. Lyra hurried over, her eyes wide. "You make it look easy." "It's never easy," Kale said again, but his voice was softer this time. They reached the last crate before the open loading zone. From here, the ship towered over them, engines humming faintly. Guards paced the ramp, their weapons heavy and sleek. And standing at the top, watching everything like a hawk, was the Shadow Baron himself. He wore dark battle armor traced with silver lines. His helmet had a smooth black visor, hiding his face. But even at this distance, Kale could feel the weight of his gaze. The Baron raised one hand, and the guards dragged Sana forward, so she was kneeling at the very edge of the ramp. "You have 1 minute, human," the Baron's voice boomed across the dock. "Turn around or watch her burn." Lyra's breath caught. "We can't just stand here." Kale's hand rested on her shoulder, steady but firm. "We wait for his mistake." As if answering Kale's thought, Sana shifted suddenly. Her hands, though chained, moved just enough to slide something small and metallic into the cuff's locking seam. Kale smiled faintly. "There's our chance." But before he could move, the Baron's voice changed, no longer cold, but amused. "You think I don't see her trying? Do you know why she's still alive, human? Because I want you to come closer, and when you do, I'll take you too." Fire in the docks. The Shadow Baron stood like a black tower above them, his voice dripping with challenge. Kale didn't speak. Words were useless now. He glanced around the dock, memorizing every escape route, every crate, every fuel line. And then he saw 3 large fuel tanks stacked near the side wall, half hidden in shadow. A dangerous idea began to form. He leaned toward Lara. "When I move, you run behind those tanks. Stay low and don't stop until you're out of the dock." Her eyes went wide. "But my sister, I'll get her," Kale said firmly. "You have to trust me." Lyra bit her lip, but nodded. The Baron's voice boomed again. 10 seconds, human. Come and die. Or walk away and live." Kale muttered under his breath, "I've already died once." He exploded into motion, braking. Cover with a sudden sprint toward the right side of the dock. Blaster fire lit up the night, bolts slicing past him as guards shouted and took aim. Kale dived behind a stack of cargo crates, his hands already grabbing the dropped blaster from a fallen guard earlier. 2 quick shots, and the fuel tanks erupted in a deep, fiery roar. The shockwave knocked guards off their feet, smoke and flame filling the air. Alarms blared, the dock lights flickering wildly. Lyra used the chaos to run, her small figure darting through the smoke toward the safer edge of the dock. Kale didn't wait. He charged up the ramp toward Sana, firing bursts at the guards blocking his path. One went down hard. Another staggered back from a well-placed strike to the helmet. The Baron didn't move. He simply watched Kale come closer, his armor reflecting the flames behind him. Sana saw her chance. With the distraction in full swing, she shoved the small metal piece deeper into her cuffs. A sharp click echoed, and the chains snapped loose. Leapt at the nearest guard, knocking him off balance just as Kale reached the top of the ramp. For a split second, brother and sister weren't the only ones reunited. Kale could see the same defiance in both their eyes. "Go!" Kale shouted, covering them as Sana grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the ramp's edge. But the Baron finally moved. With impossible speed for a man in heavy armor, he stepped forward and blocked the exit. In his right hand was a long, black-bladed weapon that hissed with energy. "You've caused enough trouble, human," the Baron growled. "Now you face me." Kale didn't hesitate. He raised the stolen blaster and fired, but the Baron's blade cut through the bolts like they were nothing. Sparks lit the air. Behind Kale, flames spread across the dock, and the deep roar of the ship's engines began to build. If they didn't end this fight now, it'd all be ash. The final stand. The heat from the fires rolled across the dock, mixing with the roar of the engines. Smoke swirled, stinging Kale's eyes, but he never looked away from the Shadow Baron. The black-bladed weapon in the Baron's hand hummed with deadly energy. One wrong move, and it would cut through Kale like paper. Behind him, Sana pulled Lyra toward the far side of the dock. "Go! Keep running!" she shouted over the noise. But Lyra looked back, unwilling to leave Kale alone. Kale took the first step forward. The Baron matched it. The fight exploded in a blur. The Baron swung first, the black blade slicing through the air with a sound like tearing metal. Kale ducked under it, driving forward with a punch to the Baron's chest plate. The blow landed solid, but the armor absorbed most of it. The Baron countered, his blade sweeping low. Kale jumped back, the edge missing his leg by inches. Sparks rained down from a burning crate nearby. "You're good," the Baron growled. "But you're only human." Kale's eyes narrowed. "That's why I'll win." He feinted left, then rolled right, grabbing a loose cable from the floor. In one smooth motion, he looped it around the Baron's weapon arm and pulled hard. The sudden jolt dragged the blade down, and Kale slammed his elbow into the Baron's helmet. The visor cracked. For the first time, Kale saw a glimpse of the man beneath pale skin, a sharp scar running down one cheek and eyes filled with fury. Baron roared, tearing free from the cable. He swung wildly, his blade grazing Kale's side. Pain shot through him, but he kept moving. "Kale!" Lyra's voice rang out. She had stopped near a fuel console, her small hands gripping a heavy lever. Kale saw the plan instantly. "Wait for my signal," he shouted. The Baron lunged, blade aimed for Kale's chest. Kale twisted, grabbing the Baron's arm and forcing it upward. The weapon slashed into a support beam, sending sparks showering down. Kale used the moment to drive a kick into the Baron's stomach, forcing him back toward the ship's edge. "Now, Lyra." She yanked the lever down with all her strength. Deep hump shook the dock as a second set of fuel tanks ignited, sending a wall of fire roaring between the Baron and the sisters. The Baron stumbled, caught between Kale's push and the heat at his back. Kale drove forward one last time, slamming his shoulder into the Baron's chest. The black-armored figure toppled off the ramp, disappearing into the burning chaos below. Kale turned and ran for the sisters. Sana had Lyra in her arms, both of them coughing from the smoke. Together, the three of them sprinted down the far side of the dock, leaping over debris as the entire structure shook from the spreading fire. They didn't stop until they were far from the glow of the flames. In the quiet after the chaos, Lyra clung to Kale, her voice barely a whisper. "I knew you'd save her, mighty human." Kale didn't answer right away. He just put a hand on her shoulder and looked at both sisters alive, free and safe for now. Finally, he said, "Let's get you home." The three of them walked into the dark streets together, leaving the burning dock and the Shadow Baron's empire in ruins behind them.